Coming up today on the Nick Craig Show, some big-time problems out in North Carolina's 11th Congressional District with Congressman Chuck Edwards. We'll get into all the details coming up. And a good Tuesday morning to you. Welcome into the Nick Craig Show, streaming live this morning on YouTube, Rumble, X, and Facebook. Don't forget that you can take the show with you 24/7 on demand. It is real simple and totally free to do. Just search for the Nick Craig Show in your favorite podcast app or visit the website nickcraig.com. Our program this morning brought to you by the Law Group here in Wilmington. Melissa Gott and her team. For any legal questions or challenges, lawgroupnc.com is their website, or 910-251-6088. We'll hear more from them coming up as we roll through this very busy Tuesday edition of the show. Oh boy, we have got a problem out in western North Carolina as it relates to the United States Congress, as Congressman Chuck Edwards is facing U.S. House of Representatives sanctions after a committee says it found that likely workplace violations as it relates to sexual harassment and creating a hostile workplace with multiple female staffers in his office. This is not the first time for those that are follow politics pretty closely in North Carolina. If this sounds vaguely familiar, it was back in May, earlier this year, that Axios, which claimed to have the scoop on this, first reported that Congressman Chuck Edwards was under investigation by the House Ethics Committee. They reported that back in the month of May, claiming that they had inside information and had received a scoop on the story. That was back in May, and now here we are in the early parts of August, and a lot of the Axios reporting from then has turned out to verify in this report, in which the House Ethics Committee is now calling for him to be censured by the entirety of the United States House of Representatives. We'll get into the details on this House Ethics report, but before we do that, let's zoom out a little bit and look at the landscape and why this is relevant. This seat out in western North Carolina, North Carolina's 11th Congressional District, is one that has been a solid Republican seat for quite some time. And in a midterm election cycle where Republicans are looking to maybe hold on to the United States House by a vote or two, a single representative or two. It's not like the Republicans are going to have some major margin that they're going to be working with if they do have a good night coming up in November. It very well could be just a single House seat that gives them the simple majority there in the United States House. You need to win all of the seats that you can. Obviously, that's the situation. And what we've seen over the last couple of months, even before this report made its way to light, which happened yesterday, but even before that, we had already seen things trending in the wrong direction in the 11th Congressional District. I want to bring you a couple of things. The Center for Politics in Virginia published their what they call their crystal ball, which is their metric of looking at how seats are looking. This was published in May, the first one, in May 6th exactly of this year, 2026. And they had the Chuck Edwards seat, North Carolina 11, which was previously a likely Republican, and they moved that to the leans Republican category. And, for a midterm election year with everything going on in a midterm that is likely to be beneficial for the Democrat Party, a lean Republican is still fine. A lean Republican is still likely a seat, especially as an incumbent member, which Chuck Edwards is. He's currently in that position, is a seat that you still win. This report was back from the month of May when they said, okay, likely to now lean. We've got a new update out from this same organization, the Center for Politics in Virginia. Their crystal ball published July the 30th, just over the last couple of days, and they have now taken, once again, the Chuck Edwards seat in NC 11. They have moved it from lean Republican to now toss-up. When you understand what toss-up is, it's exactly what it sounds like. It is a toss-up. It is a flip a coin, kind of a 50-50 look at what is going to happen in that race. So from May to the end of July, we have seen this seat go from likely Republican, meaning unless something extraordinary happens, the Republicans maintain that seat. In just the span of a couple of months, we have gone from likely Republican to now anybody's guess. Flip a coin, and that's a pretty good indication of what the outcome of this election is going to be. And that is a major problem. Same thing with North Carolina's first congressional district as well, from lean Republican now to toss-up. And again, some of those moves have everything to do with the fact of it's a midterm. And as we have talked about, and as I have mentioned at nauseum, and I will continue to do on this program, midterm elections always favor, I don't say typically, I say always because that's what history has shown us, always favor the party that is in the minority. And that is currently, of course, the Democrat Party, with Donald Trump being in the Oval Office and Republicans controlling the United States Senate and the United States House. So no surprise that you're seeing some of this take place. But that is a pretty astonishing change in a relatively short amount of time. And again, all of this happening before this House Ethics Committee report, which just came out yesterday, which you can imagine is only going to make the situation worse out in Western North Carolina. Reading through some of the details, a U.S. House committee is recommending sanctions and censure against Representative Chuck Edwards, saying that there was reason to believe that he violated House rules related to sexual harassment and a hostile workplace. The U.S. House Committee on Ethics said Monday that it reviewed allegations that Edwards created or fostered a hostile work environment and engaged in sexual harassment, finding that Edwards broke rules prohibiting sexual harassment of and unwanted advances towards House staffers. The committee has recommended that the full U.S. House of Representatives adopt the report and censure Congressman Edwards. Now, it's important to note that a censure, for those that are not super familiar with that term, a censure is in fact a slap on the wrist. It is not a motion from a procedural standpoint, Rob, from an opportunity of operation. It is not something that carries any sort of punishment with it, right? Chuck Edwards will not lose his seat if he is censured. He will not lose his ability to speak on the floor of the United States House. It is an official stance by a group, in this case, the United States House, if they vote on it, but it does not carry any penalties with it. It is in large part, for those that operate around things like Robert's Rules of Order, it is seen as largely procedural. It does not carry any sort of weight. Now, I'll admit, it's not a good thing, right? Even though there's no strict penalties with it, it's not a good thing to say, hey, I was censured by the United States House of Representatives. Now, it's not to say that it doesn't happen somewhat regularly, but it's definitely not something that you would wear as a badge of honor. It's not something that you would say is a good thing in an election in which the math and some of the numbers, as I just mentioned, with some of these reports out from the Center for Politics in Virginia, is a seat that is already trending away from the Republicans. You can imagine the situation where this U.S. House Committee on Ethics report and a potential censure, which we don't know whether that is actually going to happen or not. This is a relatively new story. Things are still relatively dynamic with it, so not sure what the outcome is going to be in terms of a full censure. It is not going to help the situation in any way, shape, or form. It is not going to encourage more voters across North Carolina's 11th congressional district in the western half of the state. It is not going to convince them to come out in droves and vote for Chuck Edwards. It is a negative in every sense of the way, even though it does not carry those very any specific penalty that you would deem to be highly detrimental. It absolutely, unequivocally, without a doubt, does not help an already pretty interesting situation that is unfolding out in western North Carolina. It does not help that at all. We are continuing coverage of a pretty interesting situation unfolding out of the United States House Committee on Ethics. A report from that entity on Monday is recommending sanctions against Representative Chuck Edwards, who is the Republican that serves in North Carolina's 11th congressional district, which is the vast majority of the western half of our state. This is as it relates to creating some level of a hostile workplace and sexual harassment of two female staffers that at one point worked for his office. The report, which runs 25 pages, does not paint a good picture for the congressman, and I wanted to just read through some of the report so you can hear exactly what the details were. Going into the details, it says, quote, specifically, the committee found that Representative Edwards engaged in persistent, unprofessional, and inappropriate conduct towards two young female staffers. While Representative Edwards denies that any of his conduct was intended as a sexual or romantic advance, his pattern of behavior would lead a reasonable observer to interpret it as such, including providing the young women, of which one was just 19 years old at the time, with lavish and reoccurring gifts, making comments regarding their appearances and the way in which they were dressing, inviting them to intimate dinners and vacations, sending notes regarding his affection, and inviting them to other activities as a way to spend time together, including, we'll get into the details, trips to Las Vegas, trips to New York City, all over the map between Congressman Edwards and his staffers. It is important to note, and the report goes on, the committee found no evidence that Representative Edwards engaged in sexual activity with or explicitly propositioned any individual under his employment. So the argument and the report here claims very clearly that Congressman Edwards did not have any sort of sexual relations with either of these two young women in his office. But the report also states, as I just read, that he walked it very close to the line, which the way in which he was acting and treating these individuals. It goes on to say Representative Edwards was aware, however, that his excessive attention towards the young women had led to rumors and innuendo in the office. Both women were uncomfortable with his behavior, which they attempted to communicate, but were put in an untenable position by the virtue of his status as their boss and a member of Congress. Representative Edwards was at minimum blind to the reality and at worst dismissive of the impact his inappropriate conduct had on the careers and the well-being of two women on his staff. Right? This is the first paragraph in the introduction of this report. It does not read well. It does not paint a rosy picture for the congressman. Lavish gifts, private vacations, intimate one-on-one dinners, some very suggestive letters and text messages written to these individuals, as I noted, one of which was just 19 years old. And it highlights the uncomfortable position that creates. You can imagine as a 19-year-old staffer, right? Obviously, still in, by the way, a full-time member of college at the time. So a college student working as a full-time scheduler for Congressman Edwards, your first job for all intents and purposes as a quote-unquote adult, you're being put in a position that you describe as uncomfortable. Of course, that's a miserable spot to be in, right? You don't want to screw up your first job. You don't want to potentially risk this professional relationship and burn any bridges or put yourself in a spot where people are bad-mouthing you with things in the future because of things. So it's a terribly uncomfortable situation, and it's why it is absolutely way inappropriate for members of Congress to be, or really large part anybody in a position like this, to be hanging out and interacting with staff members in this manner. It creates a major problem, and especially when we're looking at a member of the United States Congress in Chuck Edwards. And the report goes on to say, as discussed further below, Representative Edwards' conduct was inappropriate and implicates the laws and rules prohibiting sexual harassment and unwanted advances by a member towards a subordinate employee. The committee has previously said it, quote, takes allegations of sexual harassment and discrimination and other violations of work rights extremely seriously. And the report goes on. And some of the things in this report are, again, not painting a very rosy picture. Some of the details, Staffer 1, and throughout this report, there will be a lot of Staffer 1 and Staffer 2. Those are the individuals. Staffer 1 was 19 years old when she first interned with Representative Edwards in the state Senate. That's when he was a member of the state Senate here in North Carolina. Although she had not yet finished college when he was sworn into Congress, Representative Edwards insisted on hiring her to be his scheduler despite the difficulties of performing such a demanding role. You are a scheduler for a freshman member of Congress while you are still a full-time student. After graduating 5 months later, Staffer 1 moved to Washington, D.C., and Staffer 1 remained in Representative Edwards' congressional office for approximately 3 years, reads the report. Staffer 2, who also had worked with Representative Edwards when he was a state senator, became a legislative staffer in the congressional office. Pretty common there. You want to take people that you worked with, especially if you worked well with them and they did a good job, and you move on to Washington, D.C. This is not uncommon for members of state government, whether it's the North Carolina House or Senate or any other state legislature, to take some of your staff members to Washington, D.C. Totally normal circumstance there. And so that's what happened with this second staffer. Staffer 2 remained in Representative Edwards' congressional office for approximately 2.5 years. Those are some of the details there. And they go through and describe some of the situation. Representative Edwards went beyond norms of professional behavior by giving both women lavish gifts. Both women received numerous gifts from Representative Edwards, including jewelry totaling over $1,000, designer purses, guns, shoes, flowers, laptops and cell phones, KitchenAid mixers, robotic vacuums, vacations, tickets to performances, which included Broadway shows and one-on-one private intimate dinners. Again, back and forth with this. None of this paints a good light. None of this puts Congressman Edwards in a position to be successful in November. Now, let me be clear. I am not sitting here today making the prediction that he is going to lose the race out in Western North Carolina. I'm not making that prediction, and I don't know how that's going to play out. But again, you look at an election when the other side, the opposite party, in this case the Democrats, have so much momentum and so much wind in their sails, and you need to, and typically voter turnout for the party in charge, in this case the GOP, is so low, and it puts them in a position where you need to get every single vote possible. You need to try and encourage every single conservative, every single Republican to show up and vote. And stories like this, details like this, do not help that situation in any way, shape, or form. We'll get into more details on the report coming up here in just a couple of minutes. But before that, I want to thank the law group here in Wilmington for their continued support of the program, and remind you that when legal challenges arise, make sure you put your trust in the law group right here in Wilmington. Since 2003, their experienced attorneys have provided high-quality, affordable legal services across eastern North Carolina. Now more than 6 years ago, I went through the process of purchasing a house as a first-time home buyer here in Wilmington. The second call I made after contacting a realtor was to reach out to Melissa Gott and the team over at the Law Group to help walk me through and hold my hand through the real estate transaction process, of which I had absolutely no experience in, and the Law Group had my back every step of the way. Melissa and her dedicated team ensured that all my questions, of which I had plenty, were answered and made sure any issues that popped up were resolved as quickly as possible. Great news, folks. They're located in downtown Wilmington and just a phone call away at 910-251-6088, or you can visit them online at lawgroupnc.com. That's 910-251-6088, or online at lawgroupnc.com. It's the Law Group. Experience and dedication you can rely on. We appreciate the Law Group, Melissa Gott and her team, and their continued support here of the Nick Craig Show. All right, we'll get into more on this really damning House ethics report on Congressman Chuck Edwards coming up after this, as the Nick Craig Show continues, streaming live this Tuesday morning, YouTube, Rumble, X, Facebook, and available 24/7 wherever you get your podcasts. And a good Tuesday to you. Welcome back to the Nick Craig Show. Don't forget that you can get access to daily show notes and more, including our Nick Craig Show monthly hangout. We get together on a Zoom call for a couple of hours each and every month, chat about all of the news and topics of the day. That is going to be coming up here in a couple of weeks as we approach the middle and latter parts of August. Patreon.com/Nick Craig. A lot of great folks on there. Always great chatting with everybody. You can support the show. Patreon.com/Nick Craig. You can also get the link over by visiting the website, nickcraig.com. All right, we are continuing with details. A very damning report out of the U.S. House Committee on Ethics as it relates to Representative Chuck Edwards, as the committee there says that there is strong reason to believe that Congressman Edwards violated House rules related to sexual harassment and a hostile workplace. A couple of interesting comments coming in I wanted to address. One, why do I feel like if it was a Democrat, it would have been buried? This is probably the most interesting part of this entire story from my vantage point. And let me say this. Everything that's about to come out of my mouth is total conjecture. I don't have any evidence to back any of this up, but this is the first thing that kind of came to my mind when I saw this report released when it was in early August, less than 100 days before Election Day. There was no deadline and date that this report needed to be released. And it turns out, in fact, that the U.S. House Committee on Ethics, because Republicans have a majority in the United States House, are the ones that are responsible. And the chairman of this committee is, in fact, a Republican. And so this might, and again, all of this is conjecture. I have nothing to back any of this up, but it paints the picture that people in D.C. are probably also not happy with Congressman Edwards, because there's no reason that this report had to come out now. This report could have come out after the election in November. You might say, Nick, well, that's a little shady. No, that's politics, folks. There are constantly things that are known, reports that are pending, and things come out at a very strategic time. There is no doubt in my mind that the U.S. House Committee on Ethics and everything that's going on in a midterm election year with Democrats looking to take control of the United States House and United States Senate, everything is done very strategically. Whether you like it or not, and you can say, oh, that's dirty politics, that's part of the problem. Sure, you can make those claims, you can make those points, no question about it. But it's all part of the process. Politics is a nasty, dirty sport. It is. To its core. It has been that way for quite some time. It will likely remain that way in the future. And the timing of this is absolutely fascinating. The timing of this is very interesting, again, because there was no deadline as to when this report needed to come out. They could have rolled it. They could have taken their time with it. You'd say, oh, well, that's immoral. That's unethical. So be it. It's politics. It's everything is unethical inherently. It's a miserable game in a lot of the time. And so that is interesting to me about the release and the time of this report. And then another comment about some of the gifts coming in, about, just saying no to those gifts. That's part of the problem. And that is why the questions as it relates to a hostile workplace exists. Your boss, put yourself in this situation. You're 19 years old, or you're in your early 20s. Your boss, who is a member of Congress, one of the highest elected positions that you can get in U.S. government across the entire country, is offering you and buying you luxury handbags, jewelry, firearms, taking you out and wanting to take you out to lavish one-on-one dinners. You're put in this miserable, untenable situation where if you reject those things, if you stop taking those gifts, it could affect your career. It could affect your ability to move forward if it's something that you want to do and stay in Washington, D.C. and work on Capitol Hill. It could affect that. And again, you're not talking about 30 or 40-year veterans of the job that can say, hey, I don't appreciate this, I'm going to go look elsewhere. You're talking about young staffers, 19, 20, 21 years old that are in these positions. Their leverage is non-existent. In many cases, it is literally the first job either in or out of college. And that's why it is very important that when you're in a position of power, like a member of Congress, you don't put your staff members in that position, which is, according to this report and all of the details out of the House Ethics Committee, is exactly the situation that Congressman Edwards was putting his staff in. Totally avoidable, totally preventable. Yet he decided to put not only himself, but his staffers in this position. Some more of the details from the report, again, not painting a rosy picture. went to Staffer's 2 house to perform chores like yard work, pick her up and drop her off for events and activities with his driver, and decorated her Christmas tree together, for which he skipped votes in the United States House that evening. His job, being a member of the United States Congress, skipping votes in the House to decorate Staffer 2's Christmas tree with her at her home. Highly inappropriate. I don't care what side of the aisle you're on. I don't care what your political persuasion is. Highly inappropriate. And unfortunately, it goes on. Booked and paid for massages or other spa treatments for Staff 2. Took Staffer 2 to a casino. Bought her drinks and paid for her to gamble. Staffer 2 texted Representative Edwards after one such outing to thank him for a fun night. Several months later, he printed the text messages, drew a heart next to the messages, and hand wrote, "Perhaps my proudest personal moment." Now, you want to go out with your staff, go to a casino and pay for their drinks? So be it. I mean, you can argue that. But you're printing out a text messages and drawing hearts next to the messages? I mean, come on, man. What the hell? What are you doing? You're a grown, married man in Congress, and that's what you're doing? So unbelievably inappropriate. Continuing. Wrote poems for Staffer 2, including one that he read at her going away party in the congressional office, accompanied by a slideshow during which he cried. Several staffers present testified to the House Ethics Committee that they felt uncomfortable, and Representative Edwards acknowledged in his own testimony that he could tell staff felt uncomfortable. Oh, yeah, no kidding. You're writing a poem for a young female staffer in your office and crying? Come on. Planned an elaborate full-day outing with Staffer 1 and or Staffer 2. On one occasion, he suggested to Staffer 2 that they could go to Annapolis, which is a, of course, suburb outside of our nation's capital, for lunch, mediated by its water, stroll the town, find a day spa, see a movie, or wipe out the casino, and that he was, quote, overthinking. But I really wanted you to enjoy our time together nearly as much as I know I will. Following the day, he texted photographs to his staffer and with a note that he would, quote, cherish every moment of our time these last couple of days. I mean, what do you even say to this? This is, by any stretch of the imagination, so incredibly inappropriate. I'm not laughing because it's funny. I'm laughing because it's so cringeworthy. What are you thinking? You're a member of the United States House, and you're interacting with young female staffers like this? It's regardless of the gender, regardless of the age. This is inappropriate under any stretch of the imagination. It's a million times worse when you find out that these staffers are young females in his office. It takes an already awful situation and only exacerbates it. And that's exactly what some of these details show. How about the final one? Arranged for a singer to go to Staffer 2's birthday party to sing Ed Sheridan's an Ed Sheridan song and say that it was from a, quote, special someone. Totally insane. Totally nuts. And it is creating a now miserable situation for the Republican Party in Western North Carolina and the GOP as a whole as we approach this November deadline for these midterm elections coming up here in just a couple of months. There's no other way to put it. It just creates a totally untenable, unwinnable situation for the GOP and for Republicans moving forward. Potentially sinking a congressional seat that should be a solid Republican era, as I mentioned earlier from the, May report from the Center for Politics, the crystal ball out of Virginia, which was a safe Republican seat. It is now safe to toss up in the span of just a couple of months. Comment coming in on the Rumble chat. Is this guy married? Yes, he is married. So he's married, And regardless of whether he's married or not, this is still incredibly inappropriate. But yes, married guy, Chuck Edwards, North Carolina's 11th congressional district, operating in this manner with members of his congressional staff. Totally beyond the pale. Totally inappropriate by every stretch of the imagination. In rounding out the discussion, this very damning report out from the United States House Committee on Ethics as it relates to Representative Chuck Edwards. That committee has determined that he likely violated rules related to sexual harassment and a hostile workplace. As we just went through some of the details, putting young female staffers in his office in pretty uncomfortable situations, sending inappropriate text messages, printing out text messages with staffers, drawing hearts next to them, saying that things that he was, the times that he spent with staffers were some of his proudest moments that he's ever had. I mean, just some very weird, very inappropriate, very cringy commentaries and back and forth with members of his office in Washington, D.C. This report dropping less than 100 days ahead of the midterm elections in a seat that in years past, North Carolina's 11th congressional district out in western North Carolina, was a very solid, very clear, very clean Republican seat. We have seen that go from a likely Republican advantage to now a toss-up in the span of just a couple of months. And this is in large part due to the fact that the individual in the Democrat that is running against Chuck Edwards in the 11th congressional district is raising a lot of money and is doing a very good job in that contest. The Democrat challenger in that race, an individual by the name of Jamie Agar, is outpacing and has continually outpaced Congressman Chuck Edwards and in fundraising and support. This article is back from a couple of months ago after the first quarter FEC filings. Jamie Agar, a farmer from western North Carolina, raised over $950,000 from more than 5,600 donors in just the first quarter there. Polling has consistently shown in the western half of the state that Agar is gaining some pretty significant support, and Democrats now nationally are going to begin the process, in all likelihood, of pouring resources into this contest. They see the vulnerability. Chuck Edwards' numbers already seemingly were not doing very well beforehand, as I noted with these two shifts from the Center for Politics out of Virginia. This seat was already trending away from the Republicans prior to this report. Now that this report is out, I don't foresee that the prediction would go to leans Democrat. It will remain a toss-up, but it makes this a very tough race for Republicans. And so the question has started to circulate. Well, what happens now? Does the congressman resign from his position? Does he drop out of the race? I don't see that taking place, but there is a possibility that that happens, according to Andy Jackson, who is the director of the Civitas Center for Public Integrity over at the John Locke Foundation. In commenting on this on social media, he wrote, "In case you are wondering, Edwards can be replaced on the ballot if he submits a request to the North Carolina State Board of Elections prior to the first day on which military and overseas absentee ballots are transmitted to voters," with him then noting they go out on September the 4th. So that would give Congressman Edwards and his team about 30 days here, about 1 month, to determine what they're going to do with this, and that would be the process moving forward with this. On the other side of this, we have gotten some response from the Edwards campaign. Paul Shoemaker, a campaign spokesperson for Edwards, released the following statement after the House Ethics Committee report, saying, quote, "The committee findings completely exonerate Representative Edwards under the House rules governing sexual misconduct or harassment. They contradict the committee's conclusions. They concluded that he neither engaged in sexual activity with nor explicitly propositioned any individual staff member," which is in fact true. The House Ethics Committee report does not claim and does not indicate that there was any physical sexual activity with those staff members. back to the statement here from the campaign spokesman, they concluded that the allegations in this matter do not implicate quid pro quo sexual harassment. They concluded he did not violate federal sexual harassment law. However, the committee staff has taken it upon themselves to write their own rules based upon an interpretation that is inconsistent with the written rule of law or House rules. Representative Edwards looks forward to having his name cleared and will work to ensure that the full light of day is brought on this process and that every member of Congress and the public can see the attempt to harm the congressman who has brought no harm to others. That's going to be a tough nut to crack. It is going to be really tough with some of the details that are in this report. Some of the very clear details, like the text messages and the poems and the luxury items that were purchased, and some of the details taking place here, including brought staffer one on political trips, which is not the craziest thing in the world, but included a trip to New York City where they stayed an extra day for the congressman's birthday, for which he had planned a helicopter ride, dinner, and a Broadway show. Although Representative Edwards testified that staffer one asked to go on the trip, the committee received evidence that it was in fact his idea for her to attend the trip and that he sought to, quote, surprise her with the personal activities during the extra day that they stayed. Right? That's the issue here. You look at, again, the vast majority of people across the United States, the vast majority of people across the U.S. and in North Carolina are not super politically in tune. We've talked about this in great detail. I think that's a big problem. I think it creates a lot of the issues that we currently see in politics because so many people are just not engaged, not involved, and in large part relatively checked out on a variety of manners and issues. They don't follow this stuff very closely. They are going, and if they comes across their social media feed, if they happen to see a video on TikTok or something on Instagram or maybe a clip running on the news, this stuff does not read very well for the congressman. Now, again, it is important to note the report makes it clear. The comments from a spokesman for Congressman Edwards makes it very clear. There is no evidence that has come out in this report or that I'm aware is available that indicates that he had any sort of physical sexual relationship with either of these two women. That is abundantly clear, and I want to make that abundantly clear. But for the regular, everyday, normal, not political person that is trying to figure out who they're going to vote for in November, they don't follow politics very closely, and some of the details of this report undoubtedly will start making its way into political advertising out in Western North Carolina because some of the accusations are very damning. People are going to see this stuff and say, you were taking members of your staff to the Bellagio Hotel in Las Vegas? You were paying for them to go to the spa? You were having private, intimate, one-on-one dinners with them, buying them luxury gifts, taking them places, sending text messages about how you so much appreciated the time with them, talking about how going out with them was one of perhaps your proudest personal moments, cherishing every moment of the time these last couple of days. Any normal person reads that and says, this guy's a creep. And that's the issue. Regardless of what ends up happening in the United States House, whether they censure this guy or not, you look at people that do not follow politics very closely. This information, which absolutely the Democrat Party is going to surge into Western North Carolina, and people are going to see this and go, this guy's just weird. Why would you be treating people like that are your employees? You're a member of Congress, and you're texting that stuff to young female staffers. It's highly inappropriate. It is very creepy. It is very weird. And it unfortunately creates a situation where now Republicans are going to have to fight tooth and nail to defend a seat that should have been pretty easy to win and take likely vital resources out from other contests here in North Carolina, like the 1st Congressional District, the race between Don Davis and Lori Buckout, and have to surge resources into Western North Carolina to hold the seat that they previously didn't have to fight that hard for. This is totally avoidable, totally preventable. We will continue to watch the fallout. We'll keep an eye on if the United States House decides to censure Congressman Chuck Edwards, and we'll see what else comes out from him and his team in the coming days. And so that's the long and the short. And the comment coming in on our Rumble chat. So vote for a creep or a farmer. That's part of the problem as well. Say what you want about Jamie Agar. I'm not going to sit here and pretend that I know this guy very well, but I've been following his campaign close enough. He has done a masterful job out in North Carolina's 11th congressional district. Yes, he is a Democrat. Yes, I believe that he will likely, I don't believe he's going to likely win. If he does win, I believe that he will likely surge to the left. He will vote in lockstep with progressive radical candidates, but that's not how he's currently portraying himself. And he's doing a very good job at doing that in Western North Carolina, here across North Carolina. So all of this was preventable. All of this was avoidable. Word to the wise, don't have creepy relationships with your staff members, especially if they're young female staff members. Probably not a good idea, especially not a good idea if you're a freaking member of the United States Congress. I mean, just how stupid do you have to be to put yourself in this situation? I'm sure you liked working with them. I'm sure they did a good job. But, I mean, Jesus Christ, like, this was the best thing to do? You had no other option but to handle your business like this with individuals within your office? It's totally beyond the pale. Super disappointing to see, and it should be an interesting couple of months as we approach that election in November and as the Democrats make a shot and seemingly have a pretty good chance of being able to flip that seat from a Republican member of Congress, an incumbent, to a political newcomer. So we'll keep an eye on the details and bring you the latest right here on the Nick Craig Show. All right, that's going to do it for a Tuesday edition. The North Carolina House is set to be in later on this afternoon, taking up a couple of election bills. We'll get into hopefully some of those details later on this week, as we are expecting the final set of voting days ahead of the November election in the North Carolina General Assembly. I'll be keeping you up to date with that throughout the day. You can follow me over on social media, X at Nicholas M. Craig. Make sure you like the Nick Craig Show over on Facebook. If there is anything big that happens in the North Carolina General Assembly over the next day or two, I'll bring you the latest on social media. And of course, as it is relevant right here on the Nick Craig Show. All right, thanks to the Law Group here in Wilmington for their continued support. LawGroupNC.com or 910-251-6088. The Nick Craig Show streams live weekday mornings, 7 a.m., YouTube, Rumble, X, Facebook. Available 24/7 in your favorite podcast app and is heard weeknights, 9 to 10 p.m. on WBT Radio in Charlotte. Enjoy your Tuesday. We'll do it again tomorrow morning right here on the Nick Craig Show.